In Nebraska, I turned 1,000 miles on the trip. This sign tells the story of the Lincoln Highway and US 30 as it goes through Nebraska and the rest of the country. Information on Oregon Trail. It basically started in Independence, Missouri, and US 30 follows basically the Oregon Trail all the way to Oregon. This is a picture of just the beautiful green rolling hills of western Nebraska, the Sandhill area of Nebraska. The eastern half of Nebraska is a lot like Iowa farmland. This is the motel I stayed in southern Nebraska. Each room has a garage next door. This is a picture showing a large cattle farm. There was a lot of Angus farms in Nebraska. This is one of the stations of the Overland Trail that went from Missouri all the way to California, and it was also part of the Pony Express used these stations. This is just a picture showing how the US 30 and Lincoln Highway followed the railroads. One of the many Pony Express markers that are along US 30 and the Overland Trail. For you Lonesome Dove fans and Lori, this is the town picture of Ogallala, Nebraska. Just more markers on the Pony Express stations. They were basically 20 miles apart, and rider would come in, jump off the horse, jump on the next horse, and take off with little or no sleep. The Great Western Trail was a famous cattle trail where they drove longhorns from Texas to Nebraska. Information on the Oregon Trail again talks about the California Hill. This is the California Hill in the background where a lot of wagons had trouble getting up because of the sand hills. Just taking pictures on how far you can see down the road from the right side or the left side of the road. See forever. Talks about the importance of Sidney at one time, Sidney, Nebraska. It was short-lived though, because they found another route and how the Indians were screwed. Once again, just because we found gold. Lincoln Highway marker in Nebraska. Sparsely populated western Nebraska, and because of the sandy terrain, 19,000 acres. Large army depot used for ammunition and supplies during World War II, Korean War, and beyond. This is talking about irrigation because underneath Nebraska and 7 other states is the world's largest aquifer underground, but it's slowly being depleted because of the drought that started around the early 2000s. That's it for Nebraska. Pine Bluffs, Wyoming. The Texas Trail, driving longhorns from Texas all the way to Montana, came through Pine Bluffs, Wyoming. Trying to split the steam of the storm on the right, on the left. Straight ahead, fairly clear. That's what I'm heading for. Hopefully I make it and don't get too wet. Because a lot of Wyoming and most of the U.S. was underwater at one point. A lot of fossils and dinosaur remains in Wyoming. Also famous for train robberies. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kids, among others, were big train robbers. The town of Medicine Bow, Wyoming. This is where I stayed. I wanted to stay in the haunted hotel, the Virginian. They were booked up. I got to stay in the annex down the street. But the Virginian's famous for, there was a book written around the 1900s. They made a TV series, The Virginia, and also the movie, The Virginian. But it was based on this hotel. And here's the bar of this famous hotel in Medicine Bow, the saloon bar, and then the haunted rooms of the Virginian Hotel. It was eerie walking through there. All these rooms were rented out. Very eerie, especially these place settings and nobody there. The first sign of snow, still there in June. How far do you think that is? I measured it. 13 miles. A lot of snow in those Rocky Mountains. Those snow-covered mountains are probably 100 miles away. Sinclair, Wyoming. Sinclair gas stations. This is their refinery. That's the station I get fuel at. This is the pictures of the refinery out there. The first penitentiary in Wyoming, while it was still a territory, it was used until the 1980s. It's a museum now you can walk through. It's very eerie. So vast, you can see forever. First mountain area out of the high plains. Still, this is Wyoming. This is an abandoned Lincoln Highway that I rode for about 3 miles, all gravel. US 30 again follows a lot of the California Trail and Oregon Trail. Just more snow-capped mountains. The storm behind me in my mirror. Here's the storm to the left. That's the old Lincoln Highway. I've been able to stay out of the storms, but they're on both sides of me and ahead of me. That's what I'm looking at today, trying to stay dry. This is northwest of Kemmer, Wyoming. It's a national monument. I spent about 2 hours there. I could have stayed there a lot longer. But because of the storms and I was trying to get to Salt Lake City before I got rained on. Just, again, I could have spent all day here, going through here. I was rushed, spending the 2.5 hours or so going through this. Just all these fossils in this one area that used to be underwater. It was originally, a lot of the fossils were mined by two main guys. In the first depiction, it talks, I think it gives their names. But there was just, it was limestone shale that all these fossils were found in. From plants and animals. And up here there's some they have magnifying glasses that you can see how fine these fossils were. To the naked eye you really couldn't see them, so they had magnifying glasses set up so you could look down into there. That's a starfish. Just amazing. One of the treasures that we have. Bryan, Wyoming, it was built up by the railroad, Union Pacific, during the construction of the railroad. There was a drought, the water ran out, and they moved the main thing back down to Green Springs, Wyoming. I did not know JCPenney started in Kemmer, Wyoming, by James Cash Penney, and this store still operates. Says there's still 650 stores. My sunburnt face, trying to let it heal. I'm in Salt Lake City now. I had to make a decision, and I hightailed it from Kemmer, Wyoming to Salt Lake City. It's not the route I was going to take, but the storms it was a nasty storm, and I had to try to beat it. Ultimately, I did not. I got nailed about 40 miles from Salt Lake City. 20 miles in driving rain on a motorcycle is not that fun, but it's a trade-off for riding a motorcycle. Originally, Salt Lake City was not on my plans, but I left the house without my coat and jacket, so I had to figure out a place for Lori to mail it. And I have a friend here in Salt Lake City that I stay at when I'm skiing. So I got a hold of them, and they agreed to let me Lori send my coat there. So now I'm holed up here in Salt Lake City for a couple days, letting my face heal. I don't want it to get any worse. And got to use sunscreen later. Leaving here, I'm going to stop at Golden Spike National Park, where they drove the Golden Spike, completing the Transcontinental Railroad. At which point, I continue my trip west on US 30 to Astoria. I hope you find these as interesting. I'm trying to make them interesting. Bear with me. This editing is not the easiest thing to do in making these videos. Until next time, see ya.